President Trump's legal fight against California may have an ally in San Diego County as the Board of Supervisors considers taking a stand on sanctuary policies. Popular bike rentals hit a roadblock in two San Diego communities, the Backlash in Little Italy and Coronado. And Barrio Logan residents say more needs to be done to keep big trucks off small neighborhood streets. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, reporter Maya Sri-Krishan and a Voice of San Diego, KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen, San Diego Union Tribune reporter Gustavo Salas, and reporter Andrea Lopez Villafana of La Prensa San Diego. Well, California state leaders, all Democrats, have taken a defiant stand against the Trump administration on two issues: sanctuary cities and the census. Led by Governor Jerry Brown, California passed 3 laws designed to hamper federal efforts to clamp down on illegal immigration here. U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions responded by suing the state. Then this week, Trump's Commerce Secretary added a last-minute question to the 2020 census, a critical one, asking respondents for immigration status. That prompted California and several other states to sue the federal government. Now some local entities like the San Diego County Board of Supervisors are getting into the legal act. That's quite a setup there, a lot going on, Maya. So start with the, briefly summarize these laws, this sanctuary issue in California.
So the federal government is suing California over 3 laws that it passed last year. The first is the California Values Act, which basically tries to limit local law enforcement's involvement in immigration crackdowns and immigration enforcement. The second law prohibits private employers from allowing ICE into workplaces or to review documents without a judicial warrant. And the third created a state system to inspect federal immigration detention facilities that are located in the state of California.
Okay, so Attorney General Sessions claims California's sanctuary law is unconstitutional, and lately he's got some cities and counties to agree. Who are they?
As of now, Orange County is kind of the epicenter of the resistance in California to the so-called sanctuary laws. Earlier this week, the Board of Supervisors in Orange County decided to get involved in the lawsuit, and some of the smaller city councils have also decided to get involved. All
right, so President Trump naturally has tweeted on this. He applauded Orange County, saying California's sanctuary laws release known dangerous criminals into communities across the state. And we've got a comment here from Trump's spokeswoman Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Well, I guess
the president is encouraging people to follow federal law. There's a reason that we have laws in this country, and he expects that individual cities and states should follow the federal law.
All right, and Andrea, for the record, Trump repeatedly, as he did in San Diego here recently, he grossly exaggerates these numbers of, quotes, violent criminals among undocumented immigrants, right?
Right, and several organizations have found that that narrative just isn't correct. And it's just that immigration has been growing, but they're not more likely to commit crimes than native-born people.
Yeah, in fact, some studies have shown it's less likely, and he's gotten 4 Pinocchios. Washington Post, PolitiFact has gone after him on that. So I did want to set the record straight. So Maya, what's happening in San Diego with the county supervisors? Got all Republican board members, the 5-member board, but they kind of seem all over the map on this issue. Are they being cagey about it, or what?
Well, they haven't made a decision about whether to get involved in the lawsuit, but the chair of the Board of Supervisors, Kristen Gaspar, has decided to put the lawsuits, both the sanctuary lawsuit and the census lawsuit, in the next closed session on April 17th to decide how the county will get involved and if it will get involved.
Okay, and we've got other entities, Escondido, maybe other area cities that might join this too and join with the Trump suit?
Yeah, Escondido on April 4th will be deciding whether to submit a legal brief kind of to help support the Trump administration's lawsuit for the sanctuary city.
Okay, and if I recall, the mayor and most of that board is fairly conservative up there.
Yeah, and Escondido has a history of kind of being a little anti-immigrant, even though more than half of the city is Latino. They've had a long history of checkpoints, of rental ordinances that discriminate against immigrants.
Asking landlords to ask their citizenship and all.
Yeah, and there was a big lawsuit that the ACLU was involved with a couple of years ago because they wanted to put a shelter for the Central American migrant children in Escondido, and the city council voted that down.
All right, we have another comment here. I want to set up State Attorney General of California, Javier Becerra, says cities and counties opposing the law still have to follow it. Here's his comment.
State law is state law, and it's my job to enforce state law. I will do so. And we want to make sure that every jurisdiction, including Orange County, understand what state law requires.
Okay, so that, I mean, it does seem to clash. The feds say the same thing. Federal law is federal law, and you got to follow it, right? So we'll see how that turns out. Let's turn to this census question here. So this may have more impact, and we were talking before we went on the air about that in places like San Diego especially. So why is the census now, and the Commerce Secretary is in charge of that huge undertaking coming up in 2020, why are they adding this last-minute question about immigration status?
Well, this government has kind of the federal government has made a point of kind of figuring out who is in the country illegally and removing those people. So I would assume that that is why they would want to add that question to the census, to get a better idea about that. Mm-hmm.
And Andrew, you were commenting a little earlier here, for a place like San Diego, a border city, this is a big deal.
I think the fear among a lot of immigrants' rights advocates is that if the census asks people their immigration status, that a large number of immigrants who might be here illegally or legally might choose not to respond to the census, and that will result in undercounting. So in a county like San Diego, which with a huge immigrant population, it could really have some bad consequences for how much federal resources we get here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's estimates of like 170,000 to 200,000 undocumented people living in San Diego County, so that's significant, and it could mean changes in federal funding and even in our representation.
Right. So if you got an undercount of that, even a significant portion of that many people here, services, funding, and I mean, might even get into congressional seats and representation like that. I should point out that I think it's since 1950 this question deliberately has not been asked because of some of these concerns. And also, if you go back to the Constitution, and we'll get into that in a second on this lawsuit that California's suing, but the Constitution talks about all persons shall be counted, because of course we had slavery at the time, and the slave states didn't want whatever 3/5 or whatever they were going to count at various times in our history. They wanted all those people to be counted for these same reasons we're talking about. So California is suing on what basis, and some other states may be joining them?
So there's about 12 states in total that are suing the federal government over this. California is basically suing on the grounds that it's unconstitutional for the very reasons that you just mentioned.
Okay. Any idea, experts or anybody who's weighed in so far to say what their chances are in this lawsuit?
That I don't know.
Okay. We'll see how that all plays out. Now, and you would think they'd have to fast track that, because obviously this not only is the census coming up in less than 2 years, but also this is a profound question. The preparation for this is way years in advance. Yeah.
Yeah, but things always take time to go through the court system.
Right.
So especially something like this, which might end up, at the Supreme Court level.
Yeah, and fairly quickly, we would hope. So final question on this segment then, where do the San Diego County supervisors stand on this census issue and lawsuit?
So only one supervisor has actually come out and said that her stance on the citizenship question. That's Diane Jacobs. She represents East County, and she has said she supports asking the citizenship question. We don't really know for sure where the other supervisors stand, and how they're thinking about getting involved in the lawsuit.
And again, they'll do that in closed session at some point? Is it
I'll be in closed session on April 17th, and then whatever decisions that they make will be in the public record and announced afterwards.
Okay, and again, they would be a friend of the court, or they would simply join this one way or the other?
It's kind of unclear. They haven't really told us what action exactly they're considering, but you would assume on those grounds based on what other cities have been doing.
And Sheriff Gore of the county has weighed in so far, and his whole idea is keep your hands off, right? Step back.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he told me, and that's what he told the Union Tribune. But the Sheriff's Department and federal law enforcement here have always had a really close relationship, and so I think that they kind of will just always do what they're told.
Okay. All right, well, a couple of things to watch for on the county docket as we move forward in the next few weeks. We're going to move on. A big battle is underway in Little Italy and Coronado. Turns out not everyone is in favor of leaving bicycles on sidewalks willy-nilly until the next person comes along to rent them. So Andrew, start by explaining what this, and it's kind of a new thing here, isn't it? This dockless bikes, for people who may not be aware. What is that?
Right, so these are bikes that are out there on sidewalks and bike parking areas, and they generally have a lock on the back wheel, so you can't steal it, but if you use your smartphone, you can unlock that bike and pay for a ride to go somewhere. The real potential is that it has the potential to offer a door-to-door transportation option for people who don't want to drive or can't drive. And so big potential for San Diego's climate goals. And because these are not, you don't have to return these bikes to a docking station, the overhead cost of these companies is a bit lower, and they can offer more affordable prices for the bike riders.
And for the customers, it's flexibility. I don't have to ride back 18 blocks or wherever I got the thing. I can just leave it and go on wherever.
Exactly. There's more flexibility in where you can pick the bikes up or drop them off.
And granted, the whole idea is a good push, get people out of vehicles, save on burning of fossil fuels, improve the climate. I mean, all good intentions there.
Yeah, and I think that it's also worth noting some business districts have actually embraced this. The El Cajon Boulevard Business Improvement Association is hosting a bike ride this weekend on the dockless bikes, and they see it really as an opportunity to bring new customers into their businesses and, to get them there without a car, because, who likes parking a car in San Diego?
Right. So what are members of the Little Italy Association, that business association? They're not crazy about this.
Yeah, they've taken a pretty aggressive approach to these bikes. They first asked city officials to slap a cease and desist order on these companies, but that didn't go anywhere. So they essentially took things into their own hands and started ordering their maintenance crews to pick up the bikes from Little Italy's commercial streets and dump them all on this one sidewalk on the neighborhood's fringe. You could argue that solves the problem of any bicycles that might be blocking the highly frequented streets, but the placement of these bikes on this one sidewalk, at least when I went there, was actually blocking the sidewalk. So, they're kind of creating a new problem where one didn't exist before.
Yeah, and it kind of defeats the idea, because the idea was you can leave it and walk on, and now you got to go find it at this place.
That's right, and a lot of bike advocates have pointed out that if these bikes are in Little Italy, that means that people want to come to this neighborhood. So there's definitely disagreement about the facts here.
All right, Gustavo, I wanted to turn on to you now. The response in Coronado, in that town, has been even more harsh. Tell us about that.
No, they're just impounding the bikes that are left in town. The city doesn't want the bikes in there. They were kind of pressured by the existing bike rental companies. So the city is just tagging them, and if they're there at the end of the day, they impound them.
Okay, and now what is the rules there? There's a bike is left in front of, let's say it's left in front of a business. How long can it be left there before the city kind of tags it, and then how long before they impound it?
Well, Coronado has a code that you need a permit to use the public right-of-ways to use business. And these bike companies don't have that permit. So in Coronado's view, any bike left there can be tagged. The enforcement rules they have right now, it says they can be tagged, and then 2 hours later they'll be picked up and impounded. In practice, they're probably gathered about once a day after they're tagged.
Once a day. And do they wait a certain time till they tag them? Was there a 72-hour period in there somewhere? Or?
No, just any bikes they find.
So it's abandoned, off they go?
Yeah, I think they do it every morning.
Wow.
And then they come back at night, and companies right now have to pay about $45 to pick them up.
Okay. And how, we mentioned earlier, this is a recent thing. When did these bikes, and I guess scooters are in the same bit, the little electric scooters.
Yeah.
When did they start popping up?
Well, the city attorney issued a memo in January that basically declared that all of these bike companies could operate legally in the city without violating an agreement a partnership that the city already has with another bike sharing company. Very complicated. I won't get into the details, but basically after that memo, a lot of these businesses, dockless bike sharing companies, applied for business tax certificates in the city, and that's why they kind of all showed up at once.
All right, and was there city council debate? Did this, become a big airing? A lot of people trooping down to the council chambers?
No, there hasn't been a public hearing on this at the city council. I think that a lot of people would like to see that. I think the direction seems to be going, perhaps, that the city might take some sort of action But there are a lot of existing laws, state and local laws, that already prohibit leaving bikes in areas that would block pedestrian traffic. You already can't ride them on sidewalks in commercial areas in the city of San Diego. So the police, if they really had the resources to, or if they wanted to, could start enforcing those more aggressively, and the city wouldn't actually need to pass any new laws.
Now, one of the, and Gustavo, I should say, in Coronado, you referenced this earlier, there was a debate. There's a lot of existing, more touristy area. You got the water there and the ferry, and also existing bike rental places, and they weren't crazy about the competition, right?
Right, yeah, the debate happened last December when some of these dockless bike companies asked for the permit. The city tabled it, so they didn't make a decision one way or another. They just didn't award it to any of these companies, and a lot of it was pressure from the existing bike companies. They have something like 11 bike rental companies, storefronts in Coronado.
They certainly tend to lose a lot of market share to these dockless bike sharing companies that are, offering way lower prices than what a traditional bike rental company would offer.
Yeah, they do. I was looking it up, and Coronado offers like between $5 and $7 for an hour rental, and you have to return them to the store. So just as a consumer, it's kind of hard to compete against.
And a lot of these companies charge about $1 an hour, $1 half hour maybe, but it's certainly a lot cheaper. Yeah.
Maya?
So right now, throughout the county, it's kind of like a patchwork of where these bikes are allowed and where they're not. Is kind of the burden on the companies or on the consumer to know where you can leave a bike and where you can't?
Well, I think the companies say it's really on the rider to know the rules and to park the bikes responsibly. The businesses say that the companies should take a greater responsibility in ensuring that their users are aware of the rules. I think that the bike advocates certainly want to see that direction. They want to see more education of riders. The thing about these companies is I think they've exploded in popularity. A lot of people are now riding bikes that probably haven't ridden bikes since their childhood.
Which is a great thing for the environment.
Which is a great thing, and they're fun.
But they don't know the bike rules.
But they haven't ridden a bike in a really long time. They're not maybe experienced riders, so they don't know the right places to park their bikes, and so those people, I think, need a bit more education on the right rules of the road.
Well, this is a good segue to a soundbite we have, and I'll have you set this up for us, Andrew, the manager of the Little Italy Association.
Yeah, so I spoke to Marco Lamandri with the Little Italy Association, and I think one of his biggest beefs with these bike sharing companies is simply that they were not consulting the neighborhoods before these bikes ended up in the city.
All right, let's hear that.
Completely uncoordinated, no communication with the community or the neighborhoods whatsoever. I feel it's really a disrespectful act on the part of a lot of these people that are trying to promote mobility.
And we did have one more soundbite. Again, Andrew, you had interviewed Maya Rosas, is that right?
Yeah, so she works for a nonprofit called Circulate San Diego that's been fully in support of these programs. She also happens to be a Little Italy resident, and one thing that she told me was that she hasn't really seen all of these horrible problems of all these bikes blocking the sidewalk, that she's observed it playing out in Little Italy pretty much without a hitch.
All right, let's hear that comment.
I think the popularity shows that people really want to have an alternative to driving a car. I mean, our roads were built for driving, and so a lot of people might not go out of their way to ride a bike, but when it's just so available or on every block, it makes it a lot easier to make that decision to ride a bike.
All right, we're about out of time in this segment. Is it going to get resolved anytime soon, or people's minds going to come together, Gustavo?
Well, I know the companies are doing something. They're creating fences around Coronado. I know if you look at Lime Bike's app, they have a big red mark around Coronado, and another, I think it's Mobike, has like a fence around San Diego and says don't leave the fence. So they're trying to do something in terms of education.
All right, well, we'll follow up with your stories and see, and maybe people have figured out, the bike riders and the companies and the businesses, as we go along. Well, we are going to move on. Nobody likes the idea of big trucks rumbling through the neighborhood. That's certainly true in Barrio Logan, but its proximity to an industrial area and San Diego's main marine terminal means trucks are tempted to shortcut through neighborhood streets. And Andre, explain at the outset here, why shouldn't that be the case? This issue's been around a while, right?
Correct. And in 2005, the San Diego City Council actually adopted a resolution where they identified certain streets in Barrio Logan that had high truck traffic, and they said these streets are restricted, they're prohibited, and basically truck drivers shouldn't be found on those
And they've got
streets.
signs up there,
signs.
5-ton trucks. That's a
Yes.
pretty big truck and over.
5 or more ton trucks,
Right.
yes.
So big trucks are not, and as I said at the outset, nobody wants that going through. So what did that resolution do? It had these signs and the citations. Do the cops actually enforce this? Do they write tickets? Do they write warnings?
Well, there are several problems with the resolution. The resolution is basically a 2-paragraph resolution. It identifies certain streets. So say Cesar Chavez Parkway, which is the main one, is prohibited from Harbor Drive to Commercial Street. So they're not allowed on there. It's prohibited. But trucks can still go on those streets technically, and they could basically ignore the signs, but it doesn't mean that they're doing it on purpose. They could be following their GPS. They could be new drivers unfamiliar with the community, and they're simply just using those streets because there's too much traffic, or they're, like I said, following their GPS.
And they're all on schedules and trying to get someplace. Set in our minds a little bit, where are we talking about Barrio Logan? We're south of downtown there?
South of downtown,
along the bay.
The Port of San Diego the 10th Avenue Marine Terminal is located in the center. And then you have the 5 freeway east of the community. And of course, the Coronado Bay Bridge sits just above Chicano Park.
Okay, and it is kind of a unique situation in that it generates a lot of truck traffic where other neighborhoods
Correct.
Not, yeah.
There's multiple sources of pollution from all of the freeways, the trucks. You have the naval station there as well. And of course, the industrial companies mixed along within the community.
All right, now, and we'll get to a bite here from a resident in a moment here, but you pointed out in your story that they had studied this and they found just how many, I think the port was interested in, they're not all our trucks, but what did they find? How many trucks are we talking about?
Correct. Well, the Port of San Diego actually, as a result of residents and activists raising concerns with the amount of truck traffic, they had a study done for them, and they found that within 2 days, on April and June, 421 trucks had gone through some of these restricted streets. And of course, only 13% of the port's trucks were identified in that study. But the port has done a good job in having a designated truck route, but there is no city official designated truck route.
Okay, and again, the city, or the residents that is, feel this is toothless because they just don't see a lot of enforcement here, even though the signs are in place, right?
Correct. Well, there's several problems with the resolution. Like I mentioned, there is no designated route, simply just identified prohibited streets. And there's new drivers. They follow their GPS, or they're unfamiliar with the community and they go through certain streets. The San Diego Police Department says they are enforcing the resolution, but at the moment that I published my story, they could not provide numbers as to how many trucks have been detained or have received a ticket.
Okay, I did want to get to that interview that you had done. They complained that they're noisy and they stink. Tell us who you interviewed and who we're going to hear from here.
I interviewed one of the residents. She lives on Boston Avenue, which is another problem with the resolution, that not all streets were identified. So Boston Avenue has a high amount of traffic because it has the 5 freeway on-ramp. So Filomena Marino spoke to me about some of the problems that she's faced.
All right, let's hear that.
We want this to be a place where we want to come back and every day. You know, this is our home. And, you know, like Mari and my mom, they're here all the time. They don't get to go to work, you know, and see something different. This is what they see. This is what they hear. This is what they're smelling. This is all their senses is picking this up, and it's affecting their health, affecting their state of mind. So do I keep my mom inside of the house cooped up all day, or can she walk in her gardens?
All right, Andrew, you had a question?
Yeah, so I'm thinking to the Little Italy Association saying they felt disrespected that bike companies were dropping bikes in their neighborhood. I mean, this is a neighborhood that has really been disrespected, not just by private companies, but by the government. I mean, can you talk some about like the historical problems that Barrio Logan has faced?
Well, it's this whole truck traffic issue. Talking with residents and activists say that the main reason why there's a truck issue is there's an infrastructure issue, and it's also running on an outdated community plan. The community gathered and they had a new community plan, but then that didn't turn out to work. So, you know, you have a community that is mixed with industrial companies. You have a recycling company at the end of Boston, which is what Filomena mentions is one of the bigger problems, because they're using Boston Avenue to have their trucks go out that way. And then you have pollution from the freeways, and there's just it's just set up wrong.
And it has some of the worst air quality in the region, the highest asthma rate, hospitalization rates.
Correct.
Yeah.
Already. All right, short time left here. They're trying to get a city ordinance with some teeth in it. Briefly tell us about that.
Right, so the ordinance would actually provide a city official designated route, and any truck found outside of that route would be ticketed. But it also excludes commercial trucks, so if they're delivering to some of the businesses, they would not receive a ticket.
Okay, and what's the timetable on how when that's going to go before City Council?
The Environmental Health Coalition will be presenting that on April 12th.
Now, does that go through a committee first and then to the General Council?
Correct.
Okay, so it's going to be a little time yet, but we should get some resolution on that. Any idea on council support for a tougher ordinance?
David Alvarez has been supporting the
Councilman
residents.
for that district, yeah.
Yes, and just the residents basically, but they're hoping for a quick solution. Like I said, the port has been doing a good job at letting their drivers know to avoid certain streets, but of course if they have new drivers they can't avoid.
All right, we'll look and see what the council does on that. Well, that does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Maya Srikrishnan of Voice of San Diego, Andrew Bowen of KPBS News, Gustavo Salas of the San Diego Union Tribune, and Andrea Lopez Villafana of La Prensa San Diego. And a reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today, and join us again next week on the Roundtable.